screen here. Just press if you want to change the channel. You will be very welcome to comment or make any question during the whole webinar, during the whole session. You just use the Q&A box at the YouTube. We will have 3 rounds of conversations here. The first 2 will be with the panelists, but the last one will be with all of you. So we really encourage you to participate on the question. Well, it's an honor to be here moderating such a great group of panelists, old friends of mood stakeholders movements, to debate a very, very important topic of nowadays. The relevance and the role of the mood stakeholders alliances, mood stakeholders coalition in the current context, where the need of alignment and combination of efforts is bigger than ever, even more in the context of climate urgency that we are all involved as human society, as human beings, and also as organization, institution, governments, private sector, civil society, and the alliances together. Just to bring a little bit of the context before we start the session per se, I think all of us understands and recognize the role and importance of the coalitions, the mood stakeholders, alliances in the movements to really move on with the social and environmental agenda. Since the beginning of the century, this kind of organizations has played a very, very important and strategic role in really move forward the agenda towards a more sustainable environment and production relations, trade relations, governmental engagement, and many other aspects of this agenda. But we do have some key challenges and some elements of the current context that needs to be put into the spot of the discussions about the role and the importance of the coalitions and the alliances. First of them is the context of the polarization, the political polarization that we have. How much important and how really play a strategic role as a mediator in such polarized context as we, at least in the Brazilian reality, but many other countries and the whole, I think the whole world, we are facing at this time. The second point is how to raise the ambition. We do know that there's no way to really achieve the ambitious goals that all of us are committed without collaboration, without alignment. And the mood stakeholders, alliances, and coalitions are a good place to really guarantee this. So how to really use the movement and the importance of these coalitions in favor to raise the ambitions in the level that is demanded for the problems that we are facing, and also to face the complexity of the problems because complex problems demands complex solutions and how to really use the networks and the alliances in favor of this. And the last point is the urgency. We do know that the mood stakeholders coalition, I think the soul of the coalitions are to really guarantee a common ground and by democratic processes where all the voices could be listened, and then in the end, common positionings can be built. How to do that? Really guaranteeing the quality, the democratic equality of the dialogues and the decisions in the context of the urgency that we are. So I think these three elements are elements that are very important to be discussed, but also in a practical way. So the first round of the conversation will be about these 3 elements. How do you position in your network or your alliance coalition in relation with these topics? The second round will be more practical. Okay, we are close to the COP26. We will have the CDB Biodiversity COP next year. We are now living the UN Food System Summit. So many global agreements that are mainly negotiated and agreed by governments are being finalized or will be signed soon. And we do know that this will demand a huge effort from the private sector, from the civil society to guarantee the implementation, but also to guarantee that the agreement will be in the size that needs to be, in the level of ambitions that needs to be in the context that I mentioned before. So what's the role of your network on this sense? How do you can support? And in the end, the third round of conversation will be, okay, together, how can we work better together? So the demands, the challenge, the opportunities are also pretty much big and also very important to listen all the panelists here about what they think on these three topics. So I will start the first round of conversation. So my key question, what is the role of the networks and alliances in the current context, recognizing the trinomial, ambitions, climate urgency, and polarization? And how can we really can optimize the impacts and mitigate risks in spaces like that, coalitions, private, by really reinforcing the private governance that these coalitions can or represent as a social player. Marcelo Furtado from the Brazilian Coalition, member of the board of the Brazilian Coalition, a former facilitator of the Brazilian Coalition as well. Please, can you bring us your first thoughts on these questions? Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I would say that any coalition, in general, we think that just the fact that we succeed building a coalition is a success. But I think that's a misunderstanding, because the success of a coalition is its impact and effectiveness. But the truth is, it's so hard to keep a coalition going that sometimes we get overexcited with the simple fact that we're keeping each other alive and keeping the coalition alive. But the main question I think we should always ask ourselves is, are we serving the purpose for what we came together? The second question, I think it's a very important question to ask each other when we join a coalition is this coalition serving and delivering something that we individually were not able to do? Particularly in coalitions like ours, where you have private sector, civil society, and academia. If you're not putting something new and more ambitious and fresh on the table, then there is no added value for what you're doing. And with those two questions in mind, I think what we did at the coalition, and I'm not skipping the polarization, I'll come back to that, but the reason I'm saying this is because when we were born out of a polarization problem, which was the negotiation of the Forest Code in Brazil that divided entirely the civil society, academia, and the private sector. So we came together because we said, okay, can we work together on the implementation of this? And then we decided that we would follow two tracks. We will follow one track, which was ensuring the success of the Paris Agreement and supporting the construction and the success of the Paris Agreement, as well as influencing the Brazilian government on the definition of our NDC. And the other track was a national track of implementation of the Forest Code. I think we can say that we were quite successful, both supporting the implementation of the Paris Agreement and also designing the NDC. I think we were a bit less successful on the implementation of the Forest Code. Then we entered a second phase where we started becoming very reactive to everything that was happening in the country. And there were so many things happening in the country that we were in constant debate and constant tension, trying to react to what was going on. And at some point we stopped and said, wait a minute, is our role as a coalition to be reacting to everything that is going on all the time? Or is that the role of our individual organizations? And what our coalition is all about is designing and sharing a vision of what we believe this world should be. And then we went into the exercise of building a 2030, 2050 shared vision for climate, forest, and agriculture for Brazil. And once we agreed on that, and it's not a small thing to have private sector, academia, and civil society agreeing to this, then we said, okay, if this is the vision we agree, and this is the world we want to see in 2030, 2050, what do we need to do now to get us there? And that's the phase we're right now. So now we are dealing with the implementation of that vision. Polarization, Fabiola, happens all the time. I would say that we are now going through a difficult time in our relationship with the federal government, but polarization has been around us all the time. And I don't think we should deny it, because I think that we do have political positions that are different. The question is, how do we want to deal with it? Do we want to address it by creating an environment where we can move forward or not? And there, I think we had a learning lesson, which I'll end my intervention with that, which is the difference from building consensus and building consent. Building consensus means everybody needs to agree to something. Building consent means everybody needs to agree to this direction, even if your organization or your mindset do not fully agree with it, but understand that for this context and for this moment, this is the best decision that this coalition can take. And I think that that made a big difference in our evolution. We're constantly learning, we're constantly debating, we still have many heated debates, but I think that the level of trust among the organizations is growing, as is the diversity. So, for example, in 2018, the youth climate leaders and youth movement, like the one Rebeca represents, engaged with the coalition. So having youth in the coalition was very important. And that only happened in 2018. We're still lacking social movements, but we also got the financial sector joining the coalition. So the coalition is not a stop in time. It's a constant evolving process that requires a lot of care. And that's why it's also so good to rotate leadership, to rotate the caretakers of this coalition. So you're always bringing new energy and a new vision to the process.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. Okay, so now I invite Roberto Vacchi, who is the founding member of the Amazon Concertation, or Concertação pela Amazônia. What is your vision for these questions from the Amazonia or the Concertação pela Amazônia perspective? Roberto, please.
Yeah, well, big pleasure to be with all of you here. As I will use the phrase of Isabella Teixeira, which is the Amazon includes, inserts Brazil in the world, but also excludes Brazil from the world. So Amazon is extremely important in the present geopolitics. With that, a group of leaders in Brazil in 2 years ago started discussion about different visions of the Amazon. They need to bring the Amazon into more deep discussion on the Brazilian society, but also bring that discussion to the world. Amazon is much more complex than we think and with and the way we deal with. So the consultation is a network of people, entities, different from different areas, engaged in the Amazon perspective, engaged in the discussions of the different fronts of knowledge related to the Amazon. Basically, all of them seeks solutions, tries to develop different alternatives for the region. Nowadays, we have more than 400 leaders. It's a completely open and democratic space. The goal of the consultation is somehow to defragmentalize the discussion of the Amazon. So one of the challenges we have when we deal with the Amazon is the fragmentation of the discussion. So we have different views, different people dealing with different perspectives, with different missions, different causes. But the idea of the consultation was to be a space where all those people meet and the knowledge somehow are more, let's say, more widely spread out. So the idea is with that to increase the quality of the discussion of the Amazon with a network approach. So the idea of bringing people together to discuss about Amazon is the major mission and goal of the consultation. A very important element, which is kind of different from the Brazilian Coalition of Climate, Forest and Agriculture, which is the plural use of the word vision. So we believe that at the moment, what we need is to have different visions of the Amazon. Opening that discussion, being really open to different visions is a way to somehow, at the end, consolidate a long-term vision of the Brazilian society. Amazon is very diverse, very heterogeneous, differently from what we used to call. There is no one Amazon. What we have is a multiplicity of different cultural components, different economic situations. Everything is very, very fragmented in the Amazon, and we need to deal with this complexity. So that is one of the major challenge of the consultation, is to face the complexity of the Amazon, to provide the society somehow, to help the society to have access to different visions, to different ways of, let's say, face the challenge of bringing the Amazon as to the center of the Brazilian perspective in the future. We have no doubt that Amazon is an enormous opportunity for Brazil to include Brazil in the global geopolitics context, and is much more connected to the signs of the future, the value of the nature, the value of the culture. Brazilians should be proud of having such an incredible territory, but for that we need to deal with it and have a very long-term vision and a plan for the Amazon, and that must be based on facing the ambiguities. So transforming polarization into a field of dealing with, a field where we deal with the ambiguities with a maturity, trying to understand the different visions, the different desires, the different perspectives for the people that live there, for the Brazilian citizens, and for the global citizens as a whole. So Amazon must be discussed on a much more complex and deeper way that we are usually dealing with. So that's the perspective of the consultation for the moment.
Thank you so much, Roberto. I think you and Marcelo just brought the importance of the polarization also as a very rich source of new and also higher ambition, in a way that we are talking here. So thank you so much. I would invite now Felipe Carazo. He is the head of public policy of the TFA Global Alliance, but it's also the focal point of TFA to the FACT dialogue. FACT's a kind of a little bit more complex, because it has two tracks, one mood stakeholders and the governmental one. So the challenges is also guarantee some level of alignment and dialogue between these two tracks. Felipe, please, can you bring us the perspectives from a FACT dialogue, context to the questions that we mentioned before? Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiola, and thanks to the coalition for the opportunity of sharing some thoughts in this valuable conversation. I think that you brought three key points: ambition, climate urgency, and polarization. The FACTAL of the forest, agricultures, and commodities and trade dialogue aims to create a synergy through which the key producer and consumer countries can, within the context of a climate urgency, diminish the polarization around their positions and try to and strive for a working approach that tackles the ambition that we all have with regards to the different, food, climate, and biodiversity crises. Now, that's easier said than done. FACT has been very successful, I would say, in convening these countries to the table. I think that's quite an achievement, and as well in creating an interface with the multi-stakeholder community, which is perceived as an important ally in implementation. Now, how far can FACT take, capitalize on the moment and become a real conduit that allows these countries to come out with, tangible solutions, grounded solutions that can really advance these agendas in the different fora, not only on climate, but also biodiversity and on trade, where, we can advance the agenda forward. It's a challenge that has to be reckoned. Hopefully, we can create a good momentum for that to be achieved. But after that broad context of where FACT navigates, I would like to highlight the importance, building on what Marcelo mentioned, the importance of, building consent as to be able to be in a position to create the structures that are required for, hopefully then building consensus, right? I think that distinction is really appropriate, and it plays at different levels, at the global and at the national and even at the local level. So that's something that I believe it's worth noting as a result of the experience and the itself. The challenge that we have is that sometimes ambition and urgency, if we don't digest that appropriately, leads to more polarization. We all want to achieve a result, but maybe we get so tense and so pressured to do so that we end up creating a broader polarization in the discussions. And instead of, moving forward, we feel we move backwards, and that could even put into a debate the value of having dialogues, the value of having coalitions put together. So I do think that within the context of the FACT dialogue, there is an important need to dimension that it is collective action that will allow this agenda to be generated and hopefully be done in such a way that it builds from experiences on the ground. I think there's much more to build in terms of creating those two-way processes that allow us to understand that there's richness in diversity. I think that, to Roberto's point, the Amazon is very diverse, and I think it's not about building a one Amazon perspective, but rather if we have different patches, we have to build a quilt, right? We have to find a way we would create a united approach for that to be addressed. And I would try to close by saying that what happens in the Amazon is really important for this agenda at the broader scale. And I think it's important that the global community understands that the Amazon is just not one, that it doesn't have only one phase, one context. There's a bias at the international level, probably because of easiness in the debate, to just think that what comes from Brazil, what comes from the Amazon countries is just one position. But as Roberto highlights, There's many elements to this, and probably by learning and capturing the essence of those elements, we can then find the connectors that allow us to really create that consent, put together the structures of conversation, convening and conversation that then can lead us to consensus and move the agenda for sustainability forward. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Felipe. I think also the challenge, that fact brings beyond the government and mood stakeholders, but the northern and the southern, the consumers and the producers, how much this concept still makes sense, but also how can we deal with this concept, also in favor of the purpose that we are discussing here. Let's listen Rebeca, that is represented in a Brazilian chapter of a global alliance, which is the Alliance for Climate Action. So Rebeca, please, can you bring us a little bit of the context from ACA in regarding the questions that we are discussing here, please?
Thank you, Fabiola. First, I think that it's important to say that there is a gap between the goals of the Paris Agreement and the goals already proposed by nations on climate change. And the Alliance for Climate Action, they believe that non-party stakeholders have an important role to close this gap, such as local business, investors, cities, states and regions, and even religious groups, youths, and all the groups really from the civil societies. They have an important role, not only supporting to reduce carbon footprint, but also influencing policies and helping to shape public opinion around the matter. It's also important to say that the Alliance for Climate Action, they emerged from the We Are Still movement, which was a movement that arose in response to the United States withdrawal from the Paris Agreements in 2015. And it sent a strong sign to the market at the time and also created the necessary political space to continue climate discussions in different scenarios and contexts. Since then, all the Alliance for Climate Actions in the world, they have more than 4,000 signatories in 8 different countries. And the chapter in Brazil began in January of this year and already accounts with 60 signatories, with all different types of stakeholders. Regarding how to optimize impacts and mitigate risks, we identified 3 major barriers for this type of multi-stakeholder groups to act. The first one is that there is still a smaller number of organizations they needed to really foster climate action and awareness and advocacy on the topic. Often domestic climate champions, they struggle to have their voices heard, and they struggle to connect with global champions as well. And actors often tend to act either individually or among their own constituents, which has a limited outreach. In this sense, when you form this well-organized, influent, and credible multi-stakeholder alliance, we are able to foster and amplify the impact of their voices. And it's important for these groups not only to send opposing messages, but also to support advocacy and promote technical dialogue within the national context.
Thank you, Rebeca, so much. I would invite now Daniela, Mariuzzo. IDH works very aligned with many partners, but also works a lot to build subnational, even national governance. So it's part of the IDH's approach or modus operandi, to really work in favor of this governances. And so, Dani, what can you bring to us in the perspective of IDH? Also bringing, I think, something that Rebeca brought, how to really optimize impacts and mitigate risks, considering the context that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiola, and thank you, everyone, for the invitation to be here today. Actually, I think it was such a great idea to bring this topic for discussion, and I don't think this will be the first and last one. because I think we really need to address this kind of more philosophical questions on where are we going as networkings and alliance. And because when I was invited, I was taking a look in the topics, and I was wondering what was the reason that this became a topic in such important moment and week. And I was also trying to answer myself, maybe because what got us here will not get us to where we need to go. So we unquestionably, we know the importance of the networkings and alliancing in the last 30 years for the environmental agenda, and that's amazing. And suddenly it looks like everything that is structured and working well suddenly is not delivering impact. And so I took the liberty to not only speak as IDH, but also as Daniela, because I'm working for several years also in other kinds of initiatives like the RSPO, the Roundtable on Responsible Soy, the Brazilian group on sustainable beef, and they are all alliance and very difficult, as Marcelo said, to build. And once we get there, everyone we build trust, because trust is something that we really need to deliver impact. Something happens, and then we start to lose momentum and engagement from the multi-stakeholder dialogue. In the best or the worst example we have, in my opinion, is that there is no dialogue nowadays in the soy supply chain as it was 15 years ago. So in the matter of soy, we went back. We didn't went forward regarding dialogue, because the parts of the supply chain are really not engaged to dialogue. So I think trying to address more specifically than this topic is that it's important that all these kind of coalitions and networks, they have a very open and transparent agenda, because companies and civil societies and also producers, they join the initiatives, but sometimes they are not aware of what that means. And so I think communication is key and important for every coalition and networking, because sometimes there are companies in a given initiative, but the representative or the company itself doesn't know what they are doing there actually, because they were there because they were invited and they didn't say no. So I think nowadays the challenge for delivering impact is that we are able not only to say things and to write things and to post things in the web, but we are also able to be understood by the others, because no one is stopping and trying to understand what is the reason and the purpose of everything that we are doing. So it's a very chaotic moment, I think, from the human beings. And at the same time, the urgency is there, and we see now every movement, they are really trying to reconnect and be strong again to address the needs of solutions. But I can tell then from my experience at IDH that we are for 6 years now building what we can say a very multi-stakeholder coalition, that's a PCI, producing, conserving, including in Mato Grosso state. And that is really challenging because it's also together with the government, so all the actors plus government. And we know that there are also the transitions on the politics, and this is what I think is something that we could elaborate more on, how we create coalitions and networkings that will navigate even in different political environments. Over.
Thanks so much, Daniela. And yeah, we need also to be honest now and have this kind of space to exchange, in a self-critical and also honest way, because it's true, we are in a very chaotic context and environment still. Florian, you will be the last of this round. Then we will arrive into a more practical and very strategic discussions about the relation and the role of each network in the context of the COP26 and other important global agreements. But if you look to the 1 trillion tree, it's a the ambition is super high. 1 trillion trees planted until 2030. And I think one of the interesting points is that you are working based in a very concrete pledge. So it's very concrete asks, very concrete commitments. And so tell us a little bit from the 1 trillion tree perspective. How do you see the role and importance of the network in the context that we are talking here? Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Fabiola. And I'm really inspired by everything that you all said, and it resonates a lot. And I think we do all of that work because obviously the system doesn't deliver. It doesn't work well enough, far away from what it should deliver. And I think also I see a question here in the chat. The opportunity of those initiatives and former coalitions is really also, I believe, to infuse trust in the system that a different world is possible, and also to help nudge the system towards taking action towards realizing those visions. And so it's signaling, I think, is a really important element of our work. And you mentioned also the mobilization of commitments and using the platform and the communication reach of the World Economic Forum to really also convey that there are certain demands, not only from the private sector, but from really multi-stakeholder coalitions to have a different reality and really take different actions. So I think mobilizing those type of commitments, it's really important, but it's definitely not enough neither, because we really need more than commitments. And I think that's also in terms of your triangle, right? I mean, the urgency and polarization, ambition. The crux of it is that we're talking about unlocking collective action, which is really important to do and really difficult to do. There's so many complexities in there. We have created issues that cannot be solved as quickly as they should be, maybe. So it's really important that we also use those platforms, those collaborative efforts, to be vehicles to drive innovation. To really also show to the system that different models do work and can be scaled, and really show them to decision makers in a way that builds trust. And I'm just repeating also what I think Marcelo and many others have said before, that element of really building trust, I think, is essential. And landscapes restoration, I think that's obviously a key topic for 1T.org. That's so much about creating those shared visions, shared perspectives that will give hope and opportunity to local communities. And from opportunity comes investment and comes financial return as we restore natural capital. So that's kind of really that connection also to the land, and the shared connection to the shared land that we live on, or communities live on. I think that's such a powerful opportunity that the topic of restoration gives us to overcome some of those polarizations. And with 1T.org, we are, for one, really trying to mobilize the private sector for new forest economy opportunities, new non-timber or more emerging non-timber forest product value chains, that really hold tremendous promise, particularly in regions like the Amazon. But then we also want to show to the decision makers of the world what the needs are of some of the innovators that are really championing those new growth models. And I think that notion of conveying the needs of those who are really championing that transition, for us, that's I think a key value add that we see also of those coalitions, and with 1T.org in particular.
Thank you so much, Florian. I think trying to bring one of the elements that almost all of you brought to, it's the importance of the networks to fulfill the gaps. If we can see on this way. In the context that we are super close to the COP26, the scenarios are not so super optimistic, at least from my view, no, but also sometimes also in the opposite. What do you see and how do you see your network in this context? You know, how to fulfill the gaps, or even before, how to reason, taking advantage of the question that Rodrigo Castro brought to us, how to also influence the governments towards more and higher ambitious negotiations and agreements, like the COP26 and the CDB. But after the negotiation, after the agreement, or after COP26, how to really guarantee support implementation or fulfill the gaps, or doing both? How do you see your network? And I will ask you to bring a more practical perspective, some action plans, some ideas that you do have already agreed in your plans and your shared vision so far, from the stakeholders that you convene. And I will change a little bit the order now. So I will ask. I will start with Felipe from Fact Dialogue. How do you see also, because of the connection of facts and the COP26, I think your voice will be very important here to bring us some concrete elements in terms of how to really guarantee that it will be better agreements and how to guarantee the implementation or the fulfillment of the gaps. Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good question. And, I think it's important that we have to do an exercise. Humanity has to do an exercise of managing expectations. And I'm not talking about what we want to achieve as an end result with the crisis. That's good. But I think the expectations around the instruments that we have in place, and at a certain level, I think that we have put this overweight in a space like the COP. We use the word COP, right? COP26. What is the COP? The Conference of the Parties, under the UNFCCC agreement. And there's many things around that. The COP per se has an agenda. The parties are discussing, outcomes to advance an agenda around 5 key things, scaling up adaptation, keeping the 1.5 degree goal alive, putting rules for the loss and damage equation, finalizing the rule book, which is very important for the Amazon in the context of the Article 6, and then mobilizing finance, right? Those are the core themes that are being discussed in the COP. Whatever happens around that is just humanity trying to use this moment to address many things all together. So the reason why I mentioned in this is because for me it's so important, the COP per se as what happens after the COP. We have to learn how to use these momentums to push countries, to push stakeholders into, yes, raising ambition, yes, go beyond the content into the form. I think this is one of the key messages of this session, is that it's raising the profile of form. It's not only important what are we talking about, but how are we talking about it? How are we trying to address the issues in such a way that we can really get to a moment in time and be in a position to follow up around that? If not, we can get to Glasgow. Would it be in a formal government space or a satellite multi-stakeholder space, have a fantastic announcement, but if we don't want to see each other for half a year because the build up to that announcement was so stressful that we lose the momentum to really go deeper into the build up and the implementation of whatever we are trying to announce. So I'm using this as an example because this happens at many levels, but the what we call the COP space has so many agendas. We're trying to bring the human rights issues into the COP space. We're trying to bring the gender issues in the COP space. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that those are not important. It's just that we have to really balance out what is the COP about And therefore, in our structures and the networks and platforms that we have, try to see how we can create the conditions for these agendas to be addressed effectively. So I will close making a reference to the fact dialogue. The fact dialogue, it's an effort led by the COP2B presidency, the United Kingdom, which is trying to take advantage of the momentum and raise the profiles of certain themes. And I think it's a very strategic bet to raise the profile of the trade and deforestation connection and the impact related. But it has two different elements to it. One is, how does this connect directly to the COP negotiations? You know, which are the ways we're going to really use this to influence the outcome on keeping the 1.5 degree goal alive? And secondly, what are the things that are not connected to the COP that are really relevant? Like, for example, how can we really have key producer and consumer countries having address topics in such around this agenda in such a way that then these key agreements can be move forward in the World Trade Organization, in the CVD, in other spaces where binding decisions are important. So there's a strategy component to it that has to be clarified, because this second component doesn't get put into operation around the COP moment. It has to be put into operation along the years to come. So just wanted to highlight that out, because I think that as we go through networks and platforms, we have to have a clear sense of the spaces we're trying to influence and what are the strategies to go about that.
Thank you so much, Felipe. Well, Rebeca, the ACA, Alliance for Climate Action, what's your expectations for COP, but how do you see how ACA is thinking now to really support the implementation and please.
Thank you, Fabiola. Well, for us, this coordination between actions at the national level and global level are critical, and the Alliance for Climate Action, actually, they operate in both levels. Domestically, we articulate with all different types of actors, business, investors, and local governments, academy, and civil society, for them to commit with ambitious climate goals and monitor and report the implementation of these goals. And at a global level, all the alliances, they get together to connect, share knowledge, and collaborate globally. Also influencing the global, both national and global discussions on the topic. Concretely, every alliance, they do a build to fit all individual country needs, but all of them, they have at least three key aspects in common. The first one is to be a climate action ramp. So in order to join the alliance, everyone needs to commit to a target that's aligned with 1.5 degrees and to monitor the implementation and the performance of this target. Second is to be an organized voice, both nationally and globally. So how to support a coordinated engagement with national governments and bring these different needs from all different governments at a global level at an event such as COP. And third is related to public engagement as well. It's very important for the Alliance to engage and inspiring all the public and civil society to also join the discussion. So the discussion could go beyond these big players. And these are the most concrete actions that we have.
Thank you, Rebeca, so much. Daniela, what can you bring from us from an IDH perspective, and also the other partners and networks that you are engaged with, please?
Yes, so there are very concrete steps that we're giving this year. But I think the role of any networking and also IDH is that we can bring to the governments concrete solutions that prove it, that were proved that they work. So we always, when we share the example of PCI that actually is showing that it's possible to decrease deforestation, everyone wants to understand better what is going on, how we build that, etc. So there is no way to not try to understand at least how that effort is implying in reduction on deforestation, legal and illegal. So I think bringing the concrete cases is something that we are really doing. And we are also partners with the FACT dialogue. Our CEO, Dan Vensing, is also contributing in the preparation for this. I think it's also not only bringing to the COP, but also when it finishes, what is important is that how we translate decisions and the most important things that were that happened there to our audience, for instance, in Brazil, for the financial institutions, for farmers, for companies, because what is spoken and decided there, it's not part of everyone's everyday agenda for the common population. So the point is that it's a kind of a bubble, so it's everyone speaking about important things, but only the ones that are there know how important this is, but the other 7 billion people in the world, they don't know. So actually we need to transform this in concrete actions in the field, for instance. So I just mentioned 3 important connections that we are doing with the governments in Brazil. For instance, with the Mato Grosso state, we are supporting the development of the jurisdictional RED plus strategy. And it's very interesting to see that it should be a multi-stakeholder agenda also. So it's not IDH and the government of Mato Grosso that will build that. We need all the knowledge and resources from every single institution and networkings to build this agenda on RED, jurisdictional REDs. We are also supporting the Agriculture Ministry with the ABC, the Low Carbon Agriculture Agenda, for the coming 10 years. And actually, we will also support them to tell how the last 10 years of ABC plan impacted regarding the SDGs and will impact in the coming years. And finally, we are also building a technical assistance facility to speed up the process for the farmers, small and medium farmers, to be able to implement low carbon agriculture in their properties. So those are kind of partnerships with the government levels that we are developing in Brazil, and hopefully we will bring in the other COPs as concrete examples as well.
Thanks so much, Dani. I think very, very important elements. No, and also as the one who leads the TFA agenda here in Brazil, we perceive that the dialogues and the negotiations needs to be informed and also stimulated by concrete actions, and that the proof of concepts or the study cases or whatever the name that you want to bring, but this needs to be, and I think this is also a role of the network, even not be an implementer, but being informed and inform good decisions by the results of concrete action. Sorry, just to mention. Now I will invite my next. Here is Florian, please, from the 1 trillion tree perspective. And I think also bringing another topic that Dani brought, not only COP26, the climate COP. No, we do have the biodiversity one. We have the UN Food System Summit. So maybe other, and also national legislations, and other commitments that are in place. So please bring your thoughts here. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiola. Yeah, I would actually like to share a little bit of what the World Economic Forum is bringing to Glasgow, more so than 1T.org. Partly also because 1T.org is still a very young initiative, and we are very much like in build mode. And then there are efforts that we've been building for a number of years and are more like established. And I think that's where we really try to bring some energy to the COP convenings and conversations. And in particular, I think it's our alliance of CEO climate leaders, which will be one of our, I think, key mobilization efforts for Glasgow. But it also relates to the other COPs, of course, where we are having a thing called Business for Nature, which is not a collaboration with the World Business Council. And to my earlier point, it's a lot also really about the messaging. It's a communication effort, and it's showing that there are 70 or 80 CEOs that want to see a transition happening, and it's lots of trillions on their balance sheets, and it's quite economically quite significant. So we are trying to bundle that within those quite heavy alliances, and then curate some programming, high level events, public events in Glasgow to really have their voice present in a collective way. So not only individually, but really like to our earlier point about speaking collectively about the shared needs. So I think that's a key element. The other topic, and that relates more to, I think, also the nature of of Wanty.org. Now, one thing which I did not mention before, but when we set up Wanty.org, I think we made a promise to ourselves, but also to our stakeholders, to find new ways, maybe innovative ways to better connect the grassroots of the world with the grass tops. We are building some of those tools at WEF, and basically we are running a number of innovation challenges that are our primary tools to do that, to really surface great innovators. And I think at COP now we want to make our contribution to that as well. And this is obviously, luckily, many others are doing that as well, but with other restoration initiatives such as like AFR 100, which just launched a campaign for like the top 100 restoration innovators in Africa. Those are elements, those are initiatives that we would like to support, and really also make sure that, Rebecca, I think to your point, that those sometimes also like more younger innovators are really also present, if not in the negotiations. I think that's another topic, but really also within the multi-stakeholder engagements in COP, because I think we also face a big risk of this year's COP, particularly with the pandemic, of it lacking legitimacy, because people, not everybody will be able to be there, and we saw, Copenhagen is that we saw what can go wrong if the thing is not really legitimate and inclusive, and that's I think a certain risk also of this year's COP, that it will be perceived that way, and I think it's important that all of us really make an extra effort to make sure that it can be as inclusive as possible and as participative as possible.
Wow, yeah, so big challenge now to face. Roberto, help us. What do you think about all of this? And also the Amazon now is in the center of the climate change discussion. So how do you see the Amazon consultation on this, on the picture?
Well, first, yes, COP is important, but it has a very relative value when we consider the field reality. So I'm not saying that COP's not important, but I'm saying that we need to have a very realistic approach on the capabilities of implementation. So this is a crucial element when we deal with Amazon. So generally speaking, the Amazonian population is very, very far from the COP discussion, and the reality is completely disconnected to this global discussion. So what the consultation is trying to do is to build a frame or framing and a development agenda for the different situations of the Amazon. So the consultation presently is following the concept that we have at least 4 different situations. One is the conserved areas, the other is what we are calling transition areas, but that should be called restoration areas maybe. the converted areas and the urban reality. So at least having a development model that considered these 4 different realities. This is really crucial. We are not looking, as Marcelo mentioned, for a minimum common denominator, kind of a consensus. At the moment, what we are looking is for the maximum uncommon denominator. So instead of minimum common denominator, we are looking for the diversity. We are looking for the value of the diversity, the cultural diversity, the diversity of knowledge, the diversity of values, visions, and desires, and futures, expectations, and knowledge. So this is the basics for the development of this frame. And why we believe this is so important is that when we deal with the concept of development models, if we don't take all that into consideration, the diversity, the cultural diversity, the diversity of environmental situations, we disconnected the development model from the reality. But this type of development model, this is one of the discussions at the consultation, is something new, even for the economic science. What is the new concept of development that will bring a better balance on environment, cultural, social, and economic elements? And Brazil, for sure, is can be one of the leading countries on that discussion, because, yeah, we probably have an internal knowledge on the tropical situation, dealing with the challenges that the tropical brings to field actions. For instance, the agribusiness, the Brazilian agribusiness, the power of the Brazilian agribusiness, the potential and the challenges. So the idea is that we cannot do that without a deep involvement with the private sector, because the private sector presently spends tens of billions in the regions. So the transformation of the region is very much connected to the presence of the private sector. So therefore, the private sector is absolutely central in the discussion of this new, let's say, development model. And with that in mind, no way to face the challenges of a new institutional environment, the rules of the game, and the new governance models. So the frame, the consultation frame, is trying to address what is the better economic situation for the different situations I mentioned. What are the key fiscal, financial, science and technology, the territory ordering, the land tenure, science and technology, the infrastructure. So this type of elements are, let's say, addressed in the frame, considering the different situations, considering the expectations, all that I mentioned. So the idea is that, yes, we need to face that discussion. We need to face that complexity to transform the expectations and the results of a COP or the different events you mentioned to the local reality, to the field, and to the, let's say, to the people that live in the region.
Thank you so much. And it's also bring the importance of the discussions around the fair transition, not only the green transition. So how really to land, and also to translate this $1 billion that appears, in the announcements, how to really guarantee that it will create impact on the ground. Thank you so much, Roberto. Well, Marcelo, the Brazilian coalition has such important role on this topic since its creation. From today, there's a huge effort, to really build a strong positionings, to to influence the governments, but also to influence the global. How can you, well, yeah, please bring your thoughts.
I would say that with time, we became more and more comfortable in doing advocacy. But advocacy that you do in a coalition is different than the advocacy you do as an organization. The advocacy you do in a coalition is the advocacy of what that group agrees and understand is acceptable as a common position. And in our case, the fact that we build a vision, this 2030, 2050 vision, that brought us together, allowed us then to go back and say, okay, so what do we want, for example, from COP26? So we said, okay, we have a very clear thing, and we're discussing it right now to make it into a document, but it basically has elements of, we want to see a robust NDC for Brazil. We want climate finance. We want climate justice. We want to halt deforestation. We want the implementation of the forest code. And then you can say, okay, but it's kind of vague if you say halt deforestation. No, we have a second paper we did that has 6 actions, very concrete actions that we believe can be implemented now that can stop deforestation. And then you go over it. There is command and control. There is designating the land, the public land, to its proper use, and so on. So the point I'm trying to make here, Fabiola, is that if your coalition is only making a political statement, which we did in the past, and that's the best you can do, that's okay. But if you can advance another step and go beyond the political statement to concrete actions that all your constituency will work towards the implementation of it, then you have a much stronger position. And sometimes it's important to highlight that even what we call a position, establishing a position, can be very meaningful. 2 days ago, we issued a position on what we as coalition understand is the bioeconomy. And you can say, okay, how important is that? Well, I think it's extremely important because that means that we have, from a science-based perspective, from a social justice perspective, and from an economic prosperity perspective, a definition that we all feel very comfortable operating under. And because we have that common vision of what a bioeconomy is, we're in a much better position to, once the Amazon consultation figures out how we can all move on certain directions that will at the end deliver value, we will know our own role and we will be very comfortable implementing it. So I think the advantage of having these hard, difficult internal debates is because at the end of the day, you either come out with concrete actions that you're very comfortable moving forward, or at the very least, you're very comfortable with the values and the vision. So one example, right now, it's absolutely clear that the positions undertaken by the federal government do not represent the creativity, the hard work, the vision that we as society have already advanced on the climate debate. We as coalition, we don't think it's a good use of our time to be fighting with the government of what the government is not doing. We think that as individual organizations, we're much more effective doing that. But what we can do as a coalition is to keep showing to Brazilians and to the world that we have a vision, we have ideas, we have proposals, and we have very concrete actions that at the end of the day will deliver a planet and a country which its economy is carbon neutral, the economy can be fair, can be just, and can be sustainable. And that's very important because people are looking and saying, but wait a minute, so what you're saying is there is hope, there is light, there is intelligence, there is work happening in the country despite the political environment that we're going through. And once that situation changes, we will be together and ready to move even faster. But we're not stuck and we're not stopped. The government, the Brazilian government, for the first time that I've known ever, decided that there will be no Brazilian delegation of observers. Not even governments, subnational governments will have a Brazilian badge to participate in the COP. Did that stop subnational to go to the COP? No. And you know why it didn't? Because we have these coalitions that are here in this conversation. So IDH with Daniela secured on how to make this case of Mato Grosso to be at the COP. And the Concertação with the UN worked on how to get many of these incredible players that are discussing the Amazon there, and so on. So the point I'm trying to make here is that the other very important value of coalitions is that coalitions are, in general, bigger than the sum of its parts. They are effective and impactful.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. I think and it's the Brazilian coalition. It's playing such an important role also to keep moving the Brazilian society, the Brazilian private sector, the Brazilian producers. I think to really moving and delivering and impacting, even in a such a diverse context. Drove by the current government in relation with the environmental and the social agendas. So it's a very, very important, I think, very, very important message to close this second round. We have only 15 minutes to listen the audience. I just have one question here that was, I think, partially already covered by the speakers, because it's related with the how to influence pressure, the decision-making process of the governments. So if any other questions appear, I would propose to the speakers, and I invite who is interested to came up, just let me know about the potential connections between us. And how by these potential connections we can really leverage all the actions that we mentioned here, but the needs, the answers to the needs that we also recognize together here, and for sure agree in terms of as key elements that needs to be addressed. So I can see a great potential connections between 1 trillion tree, Amazon consultation, and the bioeconomy front of the Brazilian coalition, I can see. But I see many hands, so I will stop to talk. Roberto, please, then Florian. And if you attendees want to make any question, please feel free. We will read and try to answer in the rest of the session that we have here. Roberto, please.
Yeah, no, very interesting point on the connections of the different networks. I believe this is very, very important. And we have a clear situation of different roles. When you consider, for instance, the coalition, it's clear the importance of the Brazilian coalition on advocacy, on pressure on the different fronts of, let's say, the three powers. And the role of the consultation is very different. It's not on advocacy. It is much more on creating the environment for the different visions. It's much more on reinforcing, enhancing the knowledge that will be then make available for the further, let's say, advocacy front. So this is an example where you have a synergy of two different systems, two different multi-stakeholder systems with different roles. And when you add to that the systems that are much more involved with implementation, with actions in the field, then all the system becomes much more powerful. So I believe that we are learning not only on how to build the multi-stakeholder systems, on the process of forming, storming, and then performing, but also we are learning on how to connect the different multi-stakeholder networks to have a much more synergistic effect of what they are, let's say, aiming to.
Thank you. Marcelo, you have the floor.
I thought Florian had his hands before me. So
oh yeah, sorry, it's true, because he left and then, please, Florian.
Well, Marcelo, you could have gone ahead, of course, but now, okay, I'm gonna add to that. Thank you, Marcelo, and thank you, Roberto. Yeah, I agree. And there is, I think, a very clear mission alignment, and different coalitions can bring different assets to the table. And I think we are seeking to be additional. I think that's a really important element. And for Untitled, I didn't mention a lot about it before. I did mention that we are building this effort, but the Amazon bioeconomy has certainly emerged as an important topic for us. And really, the first question, because we are hosted at the World Economic Forum, and TFA is also hosted at the World Economic Forum, is about how can we add to the work that TFA has been doing, mostly on the forest risk side, also on opportunities such as cocoa, but now with that renewed interest from the international private sector on restoration, on Amazon cocoa, and but also on carbon, of course, which is really now becoming a more serious opportunity. And I think one of the questions we are asking ourselves is, how can we help build a situation where some of those different dots can be connected, maybe in specific jurisdictions or landscapes, where some of the needed conditions for success exist. And I think the question then that we are asking ourselves, and we would love to actually discuss further, is like, what's that additive contribution that we can make, being an international network, right? I think that's Untitled is really, I think, coming to that region from an international perspective. And we are very keen. I think the whole thing, we've been building the whole thing in a listening mode. We want to understand the needs and understand, like, what can we bring to the table to help meet some of the needs. And I think the other element that we have already started doing is what I've mentioned before in terms of those bioeconomy innovation challenges. So tomorrow we're going to announce our first cohort of innovators from the Amazon countries, 15 startups taking action on non-timber forest products primarily. And this is something we want to do on an annual basis, and we are collaborating with a lot of partners from the region to really also surface those innovators and then bring them to the attention of investors who are looking for projects, because we know that the pipeline is not yet working well enough. So that's a humble contribution that we would like to make to that challenge, also in terms of surfacing and integrating those bioeconomy ecopreneurs in those partnerships to really help make that transition to a standing forest bioeconomy, make it happen at the required pace and scale. Sorry, that was longer than intended, apologies. But I think what I'm trying to say is that, yeah, we'd love to continue that conversation.
True. Marcelo, you will be invited to make the closing, a wrap up, but I would love to listen to you if you have an idea about the connection between the networks and alliances, no? Before.
No, I don't want to take the time to. Then I'll make my comment when I do the closing.
Does anyone who wants to please, Rebeca?
I think that is an important issue that was raised here in terms of the complementarity. And the Alliance for Climate Action was born with the sense, with this goal of to complement existing ecosystems of alliances and multi-stakeholder forums with a very specific goal on action. So the way we contribute is to disseminate this route, this progression towards ambitious climate targets. And we are working together with science-based targets and other initiatives specifically with this focus. But I really see that every forum has a specific goals and focus, and we should and we must work together and collaborate so we can connect all the dots, because all the solutions, they are part of the solution.
Super important. Danny, I know that you didn't raise your hand, but I want to ask you one specific thing. I think the alignment in a context of concrete actions does have in the landscape a very, very important I think approach or way to work. How do you see in a concrete ideas about how to engage such an experience of ideation on the landscape approach?
Yeah, I think what we see in the landscape level and approach is that everyone has a voice in the table in the same level, let's say. So for you to have an idea, we are starting now in the semi-arido in Brazil, implementation of compacts in a very, very poor regions. And there are stakeholders that they don't dialogue with the other stakeholders in the same municipality. And so what we see is that it's really, really difficult to nowadays to put people to respect and dialogue with each other, and also to get a consensus or a consentment. And I think this kind of things we should improve as a whole. How can we make things that are more effective regarding simplicity? Because I see there is a trend for making things too complex. And I will finish with something that we felt when it was the beginning of the COVID. There was a common feeling around the world, at least I think most of the population, the word that was fear. So we were very much afraid of everything because we didn't know what was that. So people was at home, etc. And nowadays we see people fighting because of one mask, use or not, don't use a mask, or choosing vaccines, etc. And I think regarding climates, we are very much far from getting everyone aware to feeling concerned and having this kind of fear that the climate change is a problem for us. So we are very much far from getting this kind of awareness of the whole population in the world. So I think the challenge is how can we increase awareness of the ones that are really far from what we are discussing here.
Thank you so much. So I would invite Marcelo, just before I invite you to kind of a wrap up, because it was such a rich discussion, big challenge to you. I just want to bring one last comment from my side, from the experience of TFA as well. Now, I think I used to think a lot that the planning, collective planning, or a plan together, it's a very good way to really align and work. But now I'm more and more looking to those who really knows how to act together, how to fund together. There's no one actor that will pay the bill of the green and fair transition at all. We need to work together on this sense. And also fundraising together. No, it's like how to really look at these questions. No, and so I think the big challenge that we have beyond the planning exercise, that it's very important to give a sense of identity for a group, have a shared vision, even by combining multiple visions. No, it's also acted together, fun together. No, and also share the I think the responsibility and the celebration of the achievements that we have. So, thank you, Marcelo. Please, the floor is yours for the wrap up. 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I think first of all, thank you very much. I think it was very insightful, and it's nice that we were not here just speaking about our organizations. We're actually having a debate and exposing strengths and weaknesses, and I think that's a very important thing. In honoring that, I just want to say that for me, the essence of coalitions is that building a coalition for having a coalition is not worthwhile. Coalitions are designed for a purpose, and meeting that purpose is what should drive us. Having said that, because it's so hard, and we all know how hard it is to keep it, I would say it's very important that we persist. In 2015, we failed to make a statement about the role of indigenous peoples in the forest and agriculture and climate realm in Brazil. In this year, not only we had a statement, but there was an article in a newspaper signed by a CEO of a company, Schalke from Suzano, and a leader from the movement that helped us move on that direction, which is Capobianco, a founder of ISA. So persist. The second one is take risk. Don't accept that just because this is an uncomfortable thing and we have to take risk and keep trying to evolve. And of course, there are crises. We have crises every time in the coalition. I actually thought the coalition was going to end every single year. And every single year we survive and learn and excel. And the final one is tame your prejudice, because Fabiola, if we need everyone on board and we need to talk to everyone, we're going to need to be open to listening to everyone. And there was a time I had prejudice about these finance world, these investors, but turns out that what Daniela is doing with small scale farmers and with dealing with an incredible complex situation in the rural Brazil is very exciting. So there's so much good stuff out there. Let's not let our prejudice stop us from looking at each other and holding hands together to engage on a very difficult process, but absolutely doable, which is to really build a fair, a sustainable, and a healthy country and planet. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcelo, for inspiring words. Every time I love to listen to you and love to finish the conversation with all of you. Thank you so much. Thank for all the participants. Thanks, Marcelo, again. So, yeah, thanks for the Brazilian Coalition for have also invited me to moderate this session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you. Bye.